Hey, everybody. Kate, how are you?
I'm good, Michael.
Good.
Yeah, happy to be here
This is
with
Michael
you.
Bracey,
Yeah.
joining from Washington, D.C. And Kate where are you from today, Kate?
Seattle, Washington.
As evidenced by the beautiful mountains behind you. So,
Yes.
welcome to this very special Music Policy Forum live conversation. We are so excited to have this incredible conversation we're about to have. Neda Ulaby talking with Elizabeth Cook and Katy Chevigny about their terrific new film, The Easy Kind. Kate, you're a big fan of this film?
I sure am. I had the pleasure of seeing it in person on the big screen in Seattle, so it was really great. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. So Neda has been someone who's been thinking about the intersection of music and film and art and culture and how we talk about these things for a long time. She spent more time than she would care to claim potentially as a cultural correspondent with National Public Radio, and we are so happy to have her. Tonight, we're going to go for probably about 35, 40 minutes, as long as the conversation is flowing. We welcome questions from audience members. You can do that through the chat function on Zoom or through the Q&A box. Kate and I are going to keep tabs on that. And then this conversation we're going to put onto the Music Policy Forum YouTube page for folks that would like to watch down the road on the archive. So with that, it is our enormous honor to turn the stage over to Neda Ulaby.
Hi, hello everyone. I'm so happy to be here. I don't know how many people who are here have gotten a chance to see The Easy Kind, which is a documentary, but it's also not a documentary. It's also a an exploration of a life that is partly fictionalized, partly not fictionalized, inspired by. I haven't quite seen anything like it. It was a treat to watch. It was intriguing. Um it raised so many questions and it was fun from beginning to end. Um, Let me start with the most obvious question, the one that you're asked over and over. So forgive me. How did you come to the decision to make a semi-fictionalized documentary?
Yeah, well, thank you everybody for joining, and thanks, Nita, for that question. And Elizabeth Cook and I like to answer that question together. We kind of tag team it because this film was such a fun and lengthy collaboration and went through many different, like a lot of independent films, it went through lots of different uh, incarnations until it landed on what it is now. Um, but I can start by saying that my background is as a documentary filmmaker, and I love the kind of filmmaking where you're observing regular actual life and people doing their actual thing at home and at work. Just the camera seeing how things really are unconstructed by the filmmaker. So I love that kind of movie, and I've made a lot of movies like that. And I thought it might be cool to make a movie about musicians in Nashville when I moved to Nashville in 2015. So that was the original idea. I liked the idea of trying to capture the music scene in Nashville, and I was totally fascinated by specifically Elizabeth Cook and her music. And then after a while, I started thinking that there were going to be lots of really interesting things about the kind of life that people like Elizabeth Cook lead that I wasn't going to be able to get in a documentary format because it's too personal and too vulnerable, and people don't talk about those kinds of things in documentaries. And again, having made a lot of documentary films, I'm very used to the idea that sometimes the things that you keep closest to yourself, you maybe don't share with a film team. And if a film was being made about you, and so I thought maybe we should write something about what it's like to be an artist, a female artist in midlife, trying to make it work. And then I could put in some of my own experience and thoughts into that. It wouldn't be all on Elizabeth having to bear her life story. And that is Durail, who's featured in the
Yes.
film.
Yeah, and ever since then, he's just really been a handful. So please carry on, and I will see if I can mitigate this situation. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I like how Durail's like, what about me? Why don't you talk more about me? I mean, he is a big part of the film. In fact, a very observant viewer will see that he's a young dog at the beginning of the movie and an older dog later in the movie. But we decided to let that continuity issue just stand. Anyway, so that's part of it. And also just to now I'm just kind of, vibing here while Elizabeth deals with a dog. But
Although I have a follow-up that I can ask
please
you.
go for it. Go for it.
Well, I mean, your entire oeuvre before this very much rested on veracity and on
Right.
truth telling. And here you are telling a story where there's artifice. And what was that like for you? I mean, did it feel compromising in any way?
Oh, well, that's a great question. And it actually felt like the opposite. So, in the sense of, and I mean, one of the things that I say sometimes is that so Elizabeth is extremely warm person and very open when you talk to her. And so, one of the things that happened when I was first getting to know her is that we'd talk a little bit about the film or we'd film a little bit with her. And then when the cameras were off, when we were putting away the equipment, she would we would chat more. And often, if I was in her house, she'd say, "Do you want to sit and have a glass of wine?" Or, "I'm making some potatoes. Would you like to eat a little bit with me?" And we would have these off camera conversations in which sometimes Elizabeth would even use the phrase, she's like, "Well, off the record." And then she'd tell me some incredible story. And off the record, and then she'd tell me another incredible story. I mean, I'm sure, you're familiar with this as a journalist. And as a documentarian, this happens all the time too. And you're often sitting there going like, "Oh my God, I really want to use this material, but I can't." And so then I was sort of feeling like, maybe the only way I can get at the very uh, the kinds of things that we don't like to talk about publicly, but that really inform who we are and what we do. Maybe the way to get at that material is to write something fictional because it protects the innocent, as Elizabeth sometimes says about her lyrics. And then we could talk about problems with music labels without it being a particular music label or a particular music executive. And also, we wanted to protect my and Elizabeth's privacy and careers so it was a way actually of getting it more true as opposed to making something a little bit whitewashed in order to, we couldn't really, there's certain things we couldn't really talk about unless we fictionalize them. So it was a way to make it more true, I felt. Elizabeth, you want to take it from there? Do you agree?
Yeah, I totally agree. Too, it was just like, I mean, I like to hang out with the people I work with and get to know them, and I like to have fun while I work and create. I mean, it's supposed to be, a good time. Cowboy Jack Clement, who is one of our Pied Pipers in Nashville, he used to say, "We're in the fun business, and if you're not having fun, you're not doing it right." And so I always just like to hang out and with the people that I work with. So Katie and I would have those conversations. I would try and get her to stay and have a drink or have a bowl of beans or something, and just chit chat, and get to know each other. And I felt like the more we went, the further along we went, like the more I think we realized we were aligned in telling what is somewhat a common a story that we share, just as being creative women. And, there's definitely lenses at which you could look at my life and think it's all glamour and it's all amazing. And that part is absolutely true. And I'm having a great time. There's also some really cruddy parts that also happen. And I felt like, especially in the age of like people just putting what they want of themselves on social media or whatever, to really be forthcoming in telling your story because it's an access point to other people for other people to relate and not feel alone in their plight. And I love the idea of being able to do that.
It seems like such a fantasy to be able to tell a fictionalized version of a life online. I mean,
It
you could
is.
you could go in so many ways. You could correct mistakes, you could settle scores, you could tell it the way it was supposed to be rather than the way it was, or a better version. What w- I got the feeling watching the movie though that there were very specific choices that you made, and that there was a kind of veracity that you wanted to respect. What guided your choices when it came to what was fictionalized and what wasn't?
Yeah, another great question. I mean, some of it was organic. Like, I followed a lot of the working methods that I've done in the past with documentary film, which is to collect a lot of material and then put it together in the editing room. So we did have a script that was a chronological story. But the initial shooting script we had, there were sections where I put in like documentary concert here. And I think from the beginning, we had the idea that the musical material would be documentary footage. I didn't see any reason to stage a concert when we could just film a concert where Elizabeth is playing before her fans. You know, the documentarian in me was like, that's the easier way to do it, you know, instead of hiring hundreds of extras. So I was trying to have my cake and eat it too. That was also part of it. And the only thing I'll say about that is that in terms of the veracity thing, just to talk for a minute about the kind of form, I don't believe in messing with your viewers' heads in making your movie and I object to that. So I don't like to see a movie and say like, wait, I thought it was a documentary, but now they're lying to me. Now there's some pretense in here. So what I wanted to do instead was have a film that we're saying to you, this is a made up story with actors. Some of the things in it are true, but I'm not pretending things are true that they aren't. Like it really is it really is a fictional story. So there's some scenes in which that's much more obvious. And so here's an example, just going back to what we were just talking about. There was a scene I wrote based on my own experience, and Elizabeth shared her own experience so that we could make it work, where the character that Elizabeth plays, EC, performs a song she's working on for a music executive who has it in his power to help her career. And I've pitched many things to film executives and had it fall flat and had the executive turn me down. And that particular kind of experience where you put yourself out there, you pitch something, and then they kind of go like, thanks, but no thanks. It's very vulnerable. It's hard to forget. Do you know what I mean? It's very significant in your sort of professional development and how you build yourself up personally. So I wanted to have a scene like that, but that was not a scene we could do in a documentary context. We were never going to actually have somebody turn Elizabeth down. You know, there was no
On
way to construct
camera.
that. Yeah. So that was one where when we were talking about the kinds of we had a lot of really fun late night sessions in Nashville where we talked about things that had happened in our careers and our personal lives and said, what if we had a scene like this? What if we had a scene like that? And there were several of them where we were like, we have to put that in the movie. And that kind of thing was one of it, where you pitch to a music executive who just doesn't get you at all and you're just deflated afterwards. And then, you know, so that was so yes, there were many. I mean, you know, if this could have been like a 10-hour movie, we could have put in a lot of other great stories. So it's always a bunch of tough choices. But we did want to talk about, like Elizabeth said, both the highs and the lows, you know, and really with the if there was a theme that came out of those late night talks, it was the idea of death by a thousand cuts, that there's just all these little ways that you can be like knocked down, and that perseverance ends up being the primary force that gets you through the decade after decade of being in show business. And part of that is being true to yourself.
Elizabeth, is there anything you wanted to add about the choices that you made about how the character EC is tracks along with your own life?
Well, I think really, I mean, I had to put myself in Katie's hands and trust her. She's the filmmaker. I know how to tell a story in song form. I don't know how to tell a story in film form. And that was probably a lot of really the early work that was done on my part and her part, was us just building our rapport and building our trust in each other. Um, so that, I felt like I am going to turn myself over as an instrument for her, and she's utilizing my story and letting me collaborate heavily on things like the dialogue. And I really thought that was just so helpful and important and intuitive that Katie would send me a scripted scene, and then I would put it in my wording and send it back to her, so that the person talking in the documentary footage is still the same voice and verbiage of the character in the scripted scenes. Like, that was really important. Like, I can't imagine, like, to me that would have really made it stumble. And in order for it to be seamless, and in order for it to me have like this fever dream feeling of going back in time and forward in time and worrying about the future and then what happened in the past, and all those things. I just really had to kind of submit myself to Katy's vision for it, which was like a, a privilege to get to do.
There's a kind of tension as an audience member, Elizabeth, watching the movie of not knowing what's real and what's not real. And I was curious about how vulnerable it was for you to know that there are those of us who are watching it might think, well, this completely fictionalized exchange might actually be real, that in some ways the vulnerability that you are trying to protect yourself from in some ways is maybe more exposed because we're seeing a version of it that we think, well, maybe this is really what happened. And how do you process that as an artist? How did it feel?
Well, I mean, you have to be really brave, I think, or delusional, or both. Um, I used to say there's two types of artists, tortured and delusional. I'm trying to work more towards delusional and less tortured. And um, I think, just really turning over to Katy, and knowing that, yeah, there was going to be some things in there that a few people that are probably going to see it are going to know in specific terms, like what I'm talking about. But that's just what it is. That's like, I mean, I don't want to just completely, I'm not a fantasy creator or whatever. So I'm here for the real people in real time, in real life, to relate to through song, through this story. So I just had to be very trusting in Katy, and knowing that, no matter how it all spun out, that I was going to do my best to be true in the moment to everything that was happening, whether it was a scripted scene or clearly in the documentary footage.
And there's a parallel in songwriting, which I think made it so that it wasn't so that it was, something that Elizabeth understood what we were doing. Because like Elizabeth had talked to me a lot about her songwriting, and one of the things we were trying to do with the film was um approach somehow this is what it's like to write a song. There's no way to really show that in a movie, but to have some flavor of that. And one of the things that we talked about is how for Elizabeth, when she's writing songs, she talked about how she would, you're reflecting back on your memory, and that's also true for me as a filmmaker. And that also, as we get older, we have a longer life behind us to draw upon, and those thoughts of the past, of your childhood, or even 5 years ago, can pass through your mind while you're going about your day, and that material can form into an idea for a movie or an idea for a song, but then you spin it out into something that's not just the memory, but something else. And so I think that's something that Elizabeth does with her songwriting, and we were similarly having that kind of like looseness, take the reality and then stretch it into something poetic, far from the reality, but still having a little piece of the reality underneath it to give it gravitas and authenticity. So that kind of game was really fun creatively for both of us.
Mhm.
That it was something that I wanted to ask you about. In fact, so much of watching the movie felt like listening to a country song. There were big feelings. There was a feeling almost of like a ballad. It felt more like a ballad than a movie in some ways, and the way the story carries through with big feelings and big emotions and also small ones considered very carefully. And I wondered if that was something that I mean, this is you, Elizabeth, were working in the medium of film. Katy, you were working in the medium of music, new for both of you. How did you bring each other's mediums to each other, and how intentionally did you do that?
Hmm. Well, I think that I think that the origin story of the project is basically that Katy saw me doing my music. So there was always that, like, at the core. And then I've always loved film, and have, tried to educate myself on classic films and great classic documentaries. And so I really just felt like doing something with Katy was just like, wow. I mean, who gets to do this? Who gets this kind of chance to do this? So I don't know film. I don't understand film. I just had to sort of trust her to do her department, and that she saw something in me that was interesting enough about my process and about the songs that I write, that we could kind of ebb and flow and create something together that was greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, I mean, I also felt like I could really lean on Elizabeth's work as a songwriter to help the film have depth and have gravity and have purpose. Like, sometimes I say to people, you don't, for sure, you don't have to be a fan of Elizabeth Cook's music to like this film. And that was one of the kind of approaches. I was like, it's not like a biopic and it's not a fan movie. It's, yes, it's about Elizabeth specifically, but it's also trying to be about something more general so that I would hope like you know, textile artist might watch it and be like, I see parts of myself in this. Like it's not exclusively about music. It just happens that music's very cinematic. And Elizabeth's a wonderful performer. So that makes the movie, I hope, more powerful than if I was making the film. I don't know if I could do it about, you know, a potter. I don't think it'd be as fun to watch. But yeah, so I think so for me, I mean, I love music and I love music in films. And I've worked on many music films. And it's really fun to work on music movies because you don't have to just have people talking all the time. You get to have these breaks where there's song or just instrumentals. And so I think it's kind of a gift to the filmmaker to be able to lean into music. It makes the poetry's just comes out more easily that way. So I was excited about that.
Yeah, and I really hoped that, like, anybody that watches it, regardless of whether you're in the creative arts or not, or maybe you're just like a small business owner of some degree, but you can relate, and female specific, but not necessarily even. I mean, I feel like a lot of the themes people encounter just in their day in, day out lives. We have this really specific, hopefully highly entertaining framework of music, documentary, narrative, hybrid film, but that, anybody, regardless of what they do, could see themselves in it, in just their day in, day out life of it, just existing on planet Earth.
There's a question from somebody who's here that I'm going to uh, read, which is a question for you, Elizabeth. Did the process of developing the film impact the creative process for the new album?
Yeah, well, because there was a question along the way of how the album was going to fit with the film. And I loved the idea of there being an audio companion to the film. But a lot of the songs that are in the film, I'd already put on record. There were a few ideas that were thrown around on how to create what would be a more traditional audio partner to the film. But what ended up happening is just like, to me, which is case in point in the film, is just I don't slow my roll. I guess I like ended up writing mostly all new material, and we were able to get the record out at the same time as the film. And the Easy Kind, the song, is on this record. That is a song that I'd never recorded before, and of course I got to do it with Winona on the record. It was just so wild. So I just felt like that was really how it was meant to work out. So it was a thought along the way, absolutely, of how it was going to interplay. And it just took the whole process, the film and making the record alongside of it, like everything, takes a mountain of blind faith.
But it sounds like the album itself was conceived of and developed more or less independently of the movie.
Yeah, I started tracking, and I tracked the Easy Kind song, and I tracked a handful of new songs. I think maybe Lightly had been recorded at some point. I don't even know if it's in the cut of the film that's out now, but there were songs that are on this album that were like documented during the film. But I just didn't. I just was. I'm just anxious to move on and get my new song, like my next songs and what I'm working on, out now. So it made it such that when I came back after that first session, I came back and I wrote like four more songs, I think, and I was like, and they were all new songs, and they had no chance of being in the film because the film is locked at that point. And but I had to record them for this record, so I just kind of, probably do a lot of things that don't make perfect sense sometimes.
Also, the film took a long time. So when I first saw Elizabeth perform, she was workshopping material for her album 2 albums ago.
Oh, that's right.
So,
That's right.
so there's a lot of the songs in the film are on her last album, Aftermath, but some of them, Lightly is in the film. So there's 2 songs on the current album that are in the movie, and then several songs from Aftermath. So it's kind of, once we decided we were playing with time, meaning like the chronology of life, there's going to be songs. She sings Sometimes It Takes Balls to Be a Woman, which was a song from 2007, Elizabeth. Is that when
Yeah.
that was? Yeah. So we're kind of jumping back and forth in time, but I also like that. Like, Elizabeth is doing her work and the film is my work with her, and they're kind of like, it's not like a marketing strategy. It's just we're 2 artists making our stuff and there's overlap, and hopefully a viewer's interest in the film will cause you to want to learn more about Elizabeth's music, and you can go down that rabbit hole, and it's a real fun rabbit hole, you know.
How long did it take you to make the movie, and how long from you first seeing Elizabeth, and by the way, when you is I in my fantasy, you go and you see her and you're like, this is it, this is the subject of my next documentary. Is that really what happened? Did you fall in love
Yeah,
at
I
that?
mean, definitely something like that. I mean, it's very vivid. And actually now, I mean, I hate to say this, but it was 10 years ago. It was in 2016. And I was in Nashville, and Elizabeth was workshopping her album 2 records ago at a really cool dive bar in East Nashville called the Five Spot. And there's like dive bars like this in every city in the United States, I think, where you like walk in and it's dark and it's like a black box. And like I had a friend who was working at Country Music Television. I invited him to come see, and he's from San Francisco. And he was like, I feel like I'm in San Francisco, he said when he walked in. And I was like, well, I feel like I'm in New York. Like that bar is everywhere. And Elizabeth, there's a little stage in the back, and Elizabeth had like a small band, and she was just like, 8 feet away from me and leaning into the microphone and saying, I just wrote some new material and I hope y'all will like to listen to it. And I was just sitting there, it was $5 to get in. There were just a handful of people there, and I was blown away by how cool it was. And I also thought, I mean, I was the experience that she was workshopping material every Wednesday for a month was really cool. That was a very like, oh my God, Nashville's so cool moment for me as a New Yorker to, to think you get to do that, right? It's like watching a comedian work their material, whatever. But then I also had the thought of like, how is this person not a household name? I definitely had that feeling. And I was like, and if I can get this close to her by paying $5 and just walking in, I wonder what else there is that could be learned about this, that people, is there something about what my experience of being wowed by this that I could put in a movie? That this is both remarkable and kind of ordinary in Nashville at the same time. So yes, I did think I should make this is my next documentary. And then I thought, now what, how? And then several years later, we got into making it a fiction film. And frankly, I have to say, in retrospect, the pandemic helped us because we couldn't make the movie as fast as I wanted to. We were slowed down by the pandemic. And so we had like 2 long winters without being able to film, where I was watching a lot of documentary material and thinking about how I could spin that into a fictional scene and working on it, not in person with Elizabeth. And so it got a lot of creative, wacky ideas working that probably wouldn't have seen the light of day if we hadn't been trapped. So that's another kind of cool. It made it take longer, but it also made us go further afield creatively, I think.
Were there
Great.
fictional arcs that you considered and then discarded?
Oh yeah, many. I mean, Elizabeth had such a fascinating life. I had a whole thread for a while about Elizabeth going on David Letterman, and then there was a period where she moved out to LA, and a bunch of executives worked on creating a sitcom around her character, like a Roseanne-ish thing with Elizabeth at the center, which is a great idea. But of course, because it's Hollywood, it never happened. And so that was one of the kind of like things you try but don't work out plots. And so we had a whole thing in there about that. We had lots of interesting love affair stuff that went in different directions. Yeah. I mean, I wish we could make like 10 movies. in this milieu. I mean, I'm not done with it. It's just I had to get the movie out in the world because it was starting to get crazy, not having finished it.
Yeah,
But it
we
wasn't
could.
because I was like done with it. Like I still find it all fascinating.
Yeah, we could spin it into the series for sure. And I really
Yeah.
look forward to the day when I get it together enough to in my office to really organize because I have so many printouts. Like really printed a lot of stuff and I have so many versions of the script and all my notes and our emails and I look forward to one day having that where I can just kind of flip through it and go down memory lane of the many different forms that this project took along the way.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, how? Oh, sorry. Go
Oh,
ahead,
so no, you
Katie,
go
please.
ahead.
Oh no, I no, please. Actually,
I was
I'll
just
follow.
going to say, we were another constraint we had is budget, which, as all artists know, what is that thing they say? To get something done, you need constraints and not enough time and not enough money or something like that in order to finish something. So, we didn't have enough money. And so that also, like, there were times where we were like, we should cast somebody as her dad and have a flashback to her being a little girl with her dad. And so then we had a lot of fun thinking like we'll have cast Tommy Lee Jones to be her dad, and who knows Tommy Lee Jones who we could get, So there were like scenes like that. But yeah, at a certain point we were like we made this film for really a low dollar figure. And I think because we had an incredible team of our wonderful cinematographer, Emily Topper, and like fantastic crew in Nashville, we did a lot with a little, but there were lots of expense. We wanted to have, there was another scene with like a sort of humiliation on the red carpet at a big country music event, which you can imagine the possibilities there. And but that would have been very expensive to shoot, and that didn't end up in the movie. So there were, stuff like that. So we had to make it more intimate, which I think worked out for the best.
I don't know if there was a costume budget, but we have a question that's come in about for Elizabeth about your hat dealer. The question is, do you have one? Do you make your baseball hats yourself? They are so great, says our questioner, and who loves your oh so witty baseball hat collection.
Oh, yes, thanks. Well, yeah, so I started acquiring that hat collection because I had a fishing show on the Opry's network, the Circle Network, where I fished, and we did 2 seasons of them. And I have this amazing friend named Uncle Becca who lives in Fort Worth, Texas, and she has a business called Uncle Becca's Inappropriate Trucker Hats. And I first met her because I was at a festival, playing a festival in Key West, and me and my tour manager discovered her booth, and she could make hats in real time of anything, any inside joke you could think of. And I was on and off stage a lot during that festival, so we just kept going back and throwing down money and getting one wacky hat after another. So we struck up a friendship, and she started sending me some for the fishing show. So when we were pulling wardrobe for the film, the trucker hats came in handy. It's also nice to not have to fix your hair when you put on a trucker hat. But she is functioning online and I believe in brick and mortar around Fort Worth, Texas. And it's Uncle Becca's Inappropriate Trucker Hats. And go cruise her web store because she is a great time.
I have a question about your character EC that you play in this movie, and that is how is she different from Elizabeth Cook?
Man, I mean, I I think of myself as such a limited actor that I really just had to be myself and say those words. So I don't really feel like I'm removed from it. I feel like it is those scenes. Those scenes are me in that moment, being that person saying those lines. So it feels really accessible. I didn't really seek to differentiate her because I'm not trained to know how to do that if I wanted to, which was another word with the blessing of Katie letting me have a whack at writing the dialogue and the scenes came in handy. Because I mean, yeah, it's a different deal to perform, execute other lines of another writer.
I mean, I feel like Elizabeth really is not being overly modest here, if I may say so. Like she really did inhabit that character, and it was not entirely her. And some of the times she had to have an emotional reaction that she was not experiencing at that moment. She had to conjure it up, Notably in the scene where she fights with her friend Charlie, and we had that scripted, and she had to kind of lose her temper, but keep it under wraps a little bit. I mean, that was really,
True,
she's a
but
natural.
it,
I think the answer is she's a natural.
well,
It's
true,
like,
but that rage is in there, just waiting to come out.
well,
So
yeah, right.
that was a completely authentic feeling to me. I mean, a
Well,
completely
yes.
authentic, plausible situation to happen.
Yeah. I mean, that's true. We wrote things that we thought were realistic that could happen to either of us so that it was able to do that. But, when I was learning how to direct actors, one of the things they teach you is to tell the actor to think about some emotional experience that they can relate to this moment in order to get there. And of course, that was easier in this situation. Be like, remember when you're mad at somebody for underestimating you? Oh yeah, I can access that feeling. You know,
Yeah.
not super hard to get there. But yeah, no, she was great. And not everybody could do that. And a lot of people have been commenting on that. Another thing about making a movie about a singer, I did have some film friends who said, well, you have two choices. You can cast an actor and hope they can sing, or you can cast a singer and hope they can act. Like these are the choices. So we cast a singer, it turned out she could act. So we were lucky there.
Yeah, I do feel not a lot of actors get to sit with and perform their own words that are a reflection also of their own story. So I guess that's why I have a hard time giving myself too much credit for it.
We had a question from the other Katie, from our Music Policy Forum co-host. Katie, would you mind hopping in and asking your question?
I think that question is for Katie, and it's really Katy Chevigny, and it's really how can everyone see the film, Katie? Is it still in theaters, and is it still screening, or can we host screenings, or how does one see the film?
Oh, yeah, great question. Thank you for asking that. So, it's currently available to buy or rent on Amazon, on Apple, on Fandango. So you can watch it at home. We had the pleasure of having this fantastic limited theatrical run where we showed the film in about 15 cities, I think, in the US. And in fact, there's one more screening on Wednesday night, August 26th, in Nevada City at the Onyx Theater, and one of our editors, Curtis Grout, is going to be there, which is amazing. But I will say, we hadn't shown it to that many audiences prior to doing the theatrical run this summer. And it was really great to show it in theaters, and crowds were very lively. There was a lot of like talking back to the audience and whooping and hollering and laughter. And I think so. That's just to say it's still available to host screenings, and that's partly why we have this screening in Nevada City in a couple days. So if people are interested in that, they can. Let me think. Who could they reach out to? What's the way to do that? I guess send an email on the easykindfilm.com. I think there's a contact on there. And so I think I'm not sure whether Elizabeth or I am available to be at screenings, but we might be. And in the meantime, but certainly people could host screenings and rent the film for a special event like that. And we'd be happy to do that because I love the idea of people watching it on a bigger screen in groups.
Yeah.
Michael, do you have anything that you wanted to add at this moment?
I'm just going to say thank you. So Neda, why don't you take it home, and then Kate and I will say thanks and wrap up.
Sure, I just have one more question, if you don't mind, and that is, was there were there truths that the two of you were able to better convey through the film being fictional?
Yeah, I would say definitely. So I think there's like, I mean, I thought a lot about what it is that fiction can do that documentary can't. And one thing or documentary generally doesn't do as well. And one is if there's something that sometimes dramatic moments convey an idea more powerfully. And you can't really construct a dramatic moment in documentary, at least not the documentaries I make, because it's something that happens in front of you. I don't say to somebody, can you please be emotional right now and have a strong reaction to that thing? I don't do that as a documentary director. So the scene we were just talking about where the character you see gets mad at her good friend for not understanding the situation she's in, that's a truth that I don't know how we could have gotten at without a documentary where like two people who love each other get into an argument because life is just so damn hard sometimes. Like maybe there's a way in which we would have gotten lucky and gotten something like that in the documentary form, but to be able to write it in words that were truthful to me and to Elizabeth and then put it on the screen, that was the treat of of that opportunity of doing it fictionally. I don't know if there's ones for you, Elizabeth.
Yeah, I mean, that scene in particular it was just really so fun and so cathartic to get to do that. Boy, I mean, just talk about like it's just feels like one big therapy experiment for me, you know, on some level. Um, but yeah, I think, you know, what Katie said in the opening is true, that the format absolutely did um, give us the opportunity to be able to get at some harder truths that would have been harder, if not impossible, to capture in just pure documentary format. And it's just such a fun, it's just a playground to get to do that too. And to be with other actors too. I mean, that's just my own yayas. But yeah, I mean, most importantly and more importantly, yes, getting to a story that is closer and closer to the bone, closer and closer to the truth, I think just stands a better chance of being impactful for people.
What was the
Mm.
hardest truth?
Oh, I think the hardest truth, you know, is accepting a certain amount of grief, of loss, of some dreams getting dashed, of dreams shift, that dreams mold over time as your perspective evolves and changes. So I think that was just a huge, you know, something that's hard to get to, but also just like a really huge gift. And I feel like the ending scenes where I'm gardening and reflecting on like really the crux of like why I'm at this and what leads me. It justifies it when maybe numbers and awards and other things like aren't justifying, and you need to justify this plight that can be so difficult at times. So I think you know, coming to terms and coming to specifically not just terms, but like a dreamy, peaceful, beautiful place to exist in what is a really hard path.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Michael, do you want to wrap us up?
Thank you, Neda, and thanks, of course, to Katie and Elizabeth. And Kate, wasn't that fun?
So great. Thank you all. This has been fantastic.
Yeah, and I'll just to build on what Katie was saying about the live experience with this film. We were very fortunate at Music Policy Forum to help send speakers and presenters to Austin and New Orleans, and I hosted in LA. Katie hosted in Seattle, and just as music advocates who've been doing this work for a long time, the ability to sort of just have that, you know, really beautiful experience, you know, in a room with other fans, not necessarily of Elizabeth. You know, it's been fun, Elizabeth, about this journey is I think a lot of the people in our world have not had a chance to know much about you. So there's a real mix of Elizabeth Cook super fans who are loving the film. There are people who just think about music. There are people who are being turned on to and your music for the first time. And so I just really would encourage folks, again, to go to easykindfilm.com, reach out to the film team if you're interested in hosting a local screening, rent the film, have a dinner party, have your friends over, talk about it, think about it. And again, our job at Music Policy Forum is, you know, our tagline is we're trying to catalyze local music ecosystems and understanding that it does take a community. It takes collaboration. It takes, you know, a lot of hard work to lift each other up and really have the benefit of the work that Elizabeth and so many other people do to change our lives. So thank you so much again for the film. Neda, thank you for doing this. It was a real treat to have you with us tonight. Katie, thanks for staying up late, and Elizabeth, safe travels and good luck on tour. Thank you, everybody. We'll have this online and look forward to having another MPF Live event soonish. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you guys.
Thanks, Netta. Bye.
Thank you, Neda. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.